Hello and welcome to the Healthcare Today podcast. Our guest today is Dr Lauren Struszczak, Senior Scientist at the British Nutrition Foundation. With obesity costing the NHS an estimated £6.5 billion annually, GLP-1 medications are on the rise. But while these medications can support weight loss, they do not directly address dietary quality, which is fundamental to improving health in both the short and long term. Today, we'll be talking about how the rapid rise in the use of GLP-1s marks a shift in the treatment landscape for obesity care, and why nutrition is central to supporting patients on weight loss medications. Weight loss medications like Wegovy and Mounjaro are a shift in the treatment landscape, but there are some red flags around nutritional risk. What about the rise of such medications concerns you in particular?
So I think before we get into the things that concern me or potentially concern me, I think it's important to say these weight loss medications are proven to be, and we all see it, so effective at causing this weight loss. And this has a range of benefits beyond weight loss as well. We're starting to see some of those cardiometabolic benefits as well. So they are effective at weight loss. But with that, we have to think about how they're driving that weight loss, and that is a suppression of appetite. And with this, therefore, people eat less food. And there's a couple of, they're not even red flags, but maybe just cautions or amber flags to look for regarding people's nutritional intake. So for me, there's a couple of things that kind of pop out. So the first one is protein, making sure that people get enough protein. We tend to see people who are taking these medications also lose muscle mass, and protein's really, really important to make sure we're maintaining or even trying to build that muscle mass. And we've also got essential micronutrients. And again, naturally, if we are eating less, it might be a little bit trickier to eat all the micronutrients we need. So just keeping an eye on that. We've done a bit of the work at the British Nutrition Foundation that has shown in people who are eating a reduced amount of calories. So this is based on people eating around 1,750 to 1,800 calories a day. We can still achieve our dietary recommendations, but naturally it's a little bit trickier.
What does this shadow system of private access mean for public health, especially when clinical and nutritional support isn't necessarily guaranteed?
We know that the majority of patients at the moment are accessing these drugs through private means, and I think the recent estimations are about 90% of patients are accessing them privately. Whilst patients can access them through the NHS, this is kind of done on a rollout just because so many people would be eligible. It wouldn't be manageable within the current NHS system, where they prioritised 220,000 patients over the first 3 years. Naturally, this might lead to some inequities in terms of who can afford these medications and can also access these medications. And almost beyond that, beyond actually getting your hands on the medications, there's then the wraparound care that at the foundation we really, really stress is really important for long-term success of these medications when it comes to weight loss. Because again, whilst wraparound care, so by wraparound care I mean kind of advice on diet, tips on how to establish more healthy dietary patterns, maybe support for increasing physical activity levels. Whilst this care is recommended to come alongside the pharmaceutical treatment, it's not necessarily the case. And then if you think another layer, are there some people from higher socioeconomic backgrounds that can then pay again additionally to get this support? Is that going to grow that gap even further?
The British Nutrition Foundation's position is that the success of weight loss medications depends on sustained attention, as you said, to a healthy, balanced diet.
The key here really is we're not advising that just specifically for this group of patients. That should be for everyone. In the UK, we know we don't have the healthiest dietary patterns, so everyone should be striving towards this. It just perhaps becomes a little bit more of a priority, or as we've said, a little bit more difficult for people to achieve a healthy, balanced diet if they're eating a reduced number of calories per day. And as we said, this is really, really important for kind of that long-term success of the medications. And I'll just go into that in a little bit more detail. So we've already talked about that when you're taking these medications, the way they work is they suppress appetite. So therefore you eat less. And then if you eat less, you'll be in a negative energy balance. So you're going to lose weight. That's how they work. If you stop taking the medications, your hunger will come back. You will then eat more. And we've seen that there is an issue of weight regain when people stop taking these medications. So at the moment, it's estimated that about 2/3 of the weight you lose while you're on these medications is actually regained within the first year of you stopping the medications. And obviously, for long-term success, we ideally want people to lose the weight and then maintain their weight following that. There's different kind of durations of treatment that people can be on these medications, and I do expect in the future that might change slightly. But at the moment, it's common that people are on these medications for up to about 2 years. So when they come off these medications, if they've not changed their dietary habits and really invested the time to shift their dietary habits to healthier eating patterns or figure out what the simple swaps are, then they're not going to be able to sustain that healthier diet when they come off the medications. And we almost think of the time where they're on the medications as a time where it's a real window of opportunity, really, when you've almost turned the volume down on that food noise and you feel like, actually, I do feel like I can really tailor my dietary habits and really think about what are the healthier choices here. If we get people to do those habits while that food noise is dialed down, it gives them a better chance when they come off this medication.
The Foundation recommends structured behaviour change approaches like the 5As. So that's assess, advise, agree, assist, and arrange. Can you give us a little bit of an example how a conversation using this framework would sound different from a standard eat better and exercise conversation?
It's really, really key because the kind of eat better and exercise more, I would be really surprised if we found anyone that didn't know that that would help. So it clearly does not work. The 5As really shifts from this one size fits all, here's what you should be doing approach, to tailoring what different people can do in terms of changing their behaviors surrounding diet and maybe physical activity. Because what might work for them might not work for another person. So rather than saying, this is what you should be doing, it's saying, okay, this is why we want to make the diet a little bit healthier. This is why we want people to be a bit more physically active. And also, the key bit here is tips on how individuals can make that happen. So for me, I love an afternoon snack. So rather than saying don't have the snack, that's not sustainable for me. I am going to have the snack. It's okay. Can we do a simple swap rather than me having a bit of chocolate as an afternoon snack? How about a handful of nuts and berries? So really tailoring the advice for the individual and what works for them, what works in line with their lifestyle as well. And the second really important point here is that this framework almost has touch points as well, so that you go back and you can go, okay, how are things going? Have I found that easy? Have I not? Why haven't I found that easy? What do I need to change? Again, all kind of contributing to this sustained behavior change.
As you've said, NHS patients treatment is currently offered for only up to 2 years. Talking about changing habits over a lifetime, if the medication stops but the dietary habits haven't changed, what is the risk and how do we use that 2-year window to help build habits that last? I know you've just touched on it, but if we could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm happy to go over it in a bit more detail. So I said previously that we have seen that scientific evidence has shown that weight regain following discontinuation of these treatments is a real problem. And not only the weight regain, but you also see reversals in improvements of those cardiometabolic markers that have sometimes improved as well. So that's things like blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar levels, and so on. So as long as the medication is time bound, not only should it be seen as kind of a treatment schedule, but it really needs to be viewed as this window of opportunity where, like I said, you can turn the volume down on that food noise and you can really get to grips with some of the habits that you will sustain following cessation of the medication, building more consistent eating patterns, those simple swaps, learning to prioritize protein and fiber, building a physical activity schedule that works for you, you can weave it into your daily life as well. So that, like I said, once this treatment phase is over, those behavior changes stay with you and you can carry those on perhaps a little bit more sustainably than beforehand.
Moving on to the estimated 1.5 million people accessing GLP-1s privately. This is often done without clinical monitoring. How do we reach these people with the same level of evidence-based nutritional advice? Is it a role for GPs, community pharmacists, digital tools? Should the people be given it privately, be sharing this information?
Yeah, it's really, really tricky. And I think that answer has to be all of the above, because we don't necessarily know who is going to be the touch point with different patients. GPs are an obvious touch point, probably more so for people who are getting the medications through the NHS. I think privately there is a requirement to notify the GP, but that can perhaps get lost along emails, letters, that kind of things. Secondly, the GPs are already so overstretched in the current NHS system. So thinking about them, but also thinking about pharmacists or community pharmacists who might deal with patients more frequently, means that they're really well positioned for that. I think dietitians and nutritionists have a role here. It's kind of their specialist area. So absolutely they will be able to give that evidence-based support. Again, this is all anecdotal, but I've heard from different patients who have been accessing these medications privately, the level of support and the level of check-in that they get from their provider of whether they're accessing this additional wraparound care differs and doesn't seem to be standardized, with some private provision saying, okay, we're going to follow up and check that you've been accessing this wraparound care, when with others not doing that so much. Digital tools, yes, absolutely. There's things like the NHS Better Health Programme, which I know is encouraged by NICE for patients to be accessing when they're on these medications. But I also appreciate with the digital tools, it's so hard at the moment with everyone on kind of social media claiming to be a nutrition expert, and really whoever's shouting the loudest seems to get the most traction. So it can often be really confusing for people to know where to go to find credible nutrition guidance. I would say our website's a great starting point, and also the BDA is a really good website to get some resources on as well.
While these medications do represent a welcome shift towards recognizing obesity as a chronic disease, do you feel that the intense focus on nutrition risk, it could re-stigmatize patients, implying that if they just ate better, they wouldn't need the medication in the first place?
I think we're definitely heading in the right direction with this. So obesity should be recognized as a disease. And the fact that we have these weight loss medications represents a big shift in us going in that direction and recognizing this. We need to remember that obesity is influenced by lots of different but interconnected factors. So our biology, so some people have a genetic predisposition or genetic risk of obesity. Psychology, the environment, so particularly the food environment. Have you got takeaways very close to you? Have you not? Have you got access to a lot of fresh food nearby? Socioeconomic factors, and lots of other things. So you could have someone that is predisposed to obesity because they've got the genetic risk factors, and also they can't easily access and or afford healthy food. So that further increases their risk of obesity. And Professor Giles Yeo, so he's a professor of genetics at the University of Cambridge. He's done a great podcast with BBC Sounds that I'd really recommend as well. And it really dives into more of the mechanistic details of why people living with obesity initially struggle to lose weight to start with. But then when they do lose weight, almost their own biology is pushing back to try and get them to regain that weight. These medications offer a kind of another tool in the toolkit almost that people living with obesity can use to support them, along with that wraparound care to hopefully help them achieve healthy routines and healthy weight in the future.
As we all know, these medications have proven to be hugely profitable. Do you see any responsibility for the pharmaceutical companies themselves to ensure the nutritional support is, say, bundled with their products, particularly for those accessing them privately?
In short, it's difficult to see where the responsibility lies across that whole chain, from the creation of the medications to people taking them. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, NICE, so the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, and recommend that these medications should come with this structured advice, follow-up support. And they're the kind of body that recommend what good looks like across the NHS. And they say things like the NHS Better Health Programme, working alongside healthcare professionals, so people like dietitians and nutritionists. But we've already said not many people are accessing these medications via the NHS. The majority are getting them privately. And the level of wraparound support that people are getting when they receive these medications privately is really, really varied. On paper, people should not be getting these medications without kind of that nutritional oversight. But in real life, unfortunately, there's stories of where people are. We are at the British Nutrition Foundations, we're really, really keen to work with pharmaceutical companies or anyone along that chain to help provide that kind of support based off the latest scientific evidence that users can access easily if they need to as well.
You're a scientist working at the intersection of nutrition and public health. If you could have one message that will get out there, what's the one message you wish you could broadcast directly into the ears of every person who are considering or are currently taking these medications?
I think a nice short message is make every calorie count. Naturally, as you're reducing the amount of calories you're eating per day, making sure you make nutrient-rich choices, prioritizing those nutrients that are really, really going to support your health. So that's protein, that is fiber, that is your micronutrients, prioritizing them to make sure that you're getting all the nutrients you need for your body to perform healthily. And then my second point was really, really try to push for this access towards that wraparound care and invest in trying to change your behavior so that when you come off these medications, you stand the best chance. You've learned lots of techniques and tips to sustain healthy dietary habits in the future.
The conversation around GLP-1s is moving incredibly fast. What's the next big question you and your colleagues at the British Nutrition Foundation are trying to answer? And what's on your research horizon?
It's not necessarily a new one, but it's always there, and we don't seem to get any further with it, is fiber intake. So fiber is a real priority for us. We know that less than 9% of UK adults, and this is all adults, not just adults that are taking weight loss medications, are achieving their recommended fiber intake, which is about 30 grams a day. And I am always so surprised by that statistic. I think it's just incredibly low. And naturally, for people on weight loss medications that are eating even less, it might be harder for them to achieve this level of fiber consumption. Secondly, something we've not really talked about yet is that a lot of people who are taking these weight loss medications report kind of gastrointestinal side effects. So things like nausea, bloating, diarrhea, constipation. So much so that sometimes this can actually lead to people saying, no, I can't take the medications anymore. And there might be something there in terms of fiber intake that can potentially help with these symptoms, particularly if fiber intake's dialed up slowly. We don't want to be going from not eating very much fiber at all to going straight up to our 30 grams a day. Otherwise, in that short period of time, we'd see a bit of an exacerbation of the symptoms. But if dialed up slowly, fiber can potentially help with some of those issues. So things like prioritizing nuts, seeds, whole grains, pulses, fruit and veg, which all obviously have other benefits as well. More broadly, across kind of the nutrition landscape, I think something we are increasingly concerned with is how do we support diets that are healthy, accessible and realistic, but at the same time being environmentally sustainable. And this is a much bigger question about prioritizing human and planetary health. For me personally, I think we will begin to see in the nutrition science space a lot more people looking at how we can tailor our endogenous GLP-1 hormones. So we make GLP-1 in our body naturally. It gets broken down really, really quickly. So we don't see these effects that the medications do. So I think a lot of people will be trying to tap into that a little bit more and learn more about it.
My line of questioning throughout this conversation has erred on the side of negative, and I think we can all recognise that the potential for huge change that this type of medication does offer. What gives you hope that this movement could be a catalyst for lasting improvements in diet and health?
We've said this at the start, that the weight loss medications are extremely effective in reducing people's weight to a much greater extent than anything we've ever seen before. At the moment, this is seen as very much as a treatment for people living with obesity, and we recognise that with the NHS criteria being for people who are severely obese and also have other comorbidities. However, in the future, not to say this medication could be used as almost a prevention. So it's actually licensed for people with a BMI of, I can't remember off the top of my head if it's over 27 or over 27.5. So that we can almost prevent people from moving into higher risk categories. I might get a little bit carried away here, but there's a lot of things we don't know. So we also don't know how it shifts dietary behaviors of people who are living with people who are taking these medications. So perhaps if one of a parent is taking these medications and that parent is responsible for the food shop and that parent starts making nutrient dense, healthier dietary choices, does that have a knock-on effect of the children in that household and then their future? I'm not sure. We don't have the evidence of that at the moment, but potentially. And then looking at it from another lens is what effect do these medications have long term on the food environment and the food system? Does it almost force the food industry to change and to start prioritizing nutrient dense, healthier choices, so much so that in, I don't know, a decade's time, the food environment is a much healthier place? Who knows? I might be being too positive, but we can always hope.
There's nothing wrong with a little bit of positivity. Dr. Lauren Struszczak, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.